other young people join your movement since all the focus was on your confinement, if you will, and has it been even more so since the book came out, or is
Right.
it still too soon?
I have not actually been in an undercover video. Really, I may have made a cameo appearance here and there, but I have not actually done it for approximately 3.5 years. So I have relied totally on training people. We actually have a training program at Project Veritas. We bring people to New York. We have an office in Westchester. A donor has given to us. We bring people there. It looks like a bunker. There's no windows. And we actually train them in the art of how to do what I do. And we recruit people from all walks of life, usually people with no political experience, who just are really passionate. So yes, it's not me that's doing it. We train people.
Have you had acting training?
I have. I was in musical theater in high school and college.
Not to mention law school, that'll do it.
And I didn't fare too well in law school.
Thank goodness.
I was sneaking out of the law school to make videos on Planned Parenthood. So, but yes, law school.
James, do you fear for your life?
See, it's the premise of your question I don't agree with. Your question implies that, we should, it's just, I don't fear for my life because I don't think they're going to do that to me. What they are going to do is use the Justice Department to try to shut me down through legal harassment. And Tocqueville said that it's the minor subjection in human affairs that drives men crazy.
Right.
It's not the violence, it's the regulations and the IRS. By the way, we are tax exempt. Project Veritas is tax exempt. We are a 501c3. I know what you're thinking. How is that possible? The bureaucrat was probably asleep at the wheel today. He's standing there. But he had no idea. Or it's just Veritas. He probably thought it was some Latin society or something. Right. But we are tax exempt, and we do get. What's that?
It depends on when you got
You
it.
got it right around the time they were correct.
Signed by Lewis Lerner. So.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But we are tax exempt, so we get donations. But I'm not afraid because I want to set an example for people not to be afraid.
Good. That's
So
great.
I try not to be afraid.
Yeah.
Jim, can I ask you, where do you make donations to Veritas?
Well, my colleague here in the black glasses, I'm going to point out, his name is Daniel Francisco. He has a computer with him that you can actually make a donation online. But our website is projectveritas.com.
And you make it out to that?
Veritas, Latin word for truth.
Yes.
Project Veritas, there's a website on there, an
I
address.
also have cards with the website, so if anybody wants to take one
You can
afterwards.
harass Dan and work with him on
Folks,
that.
your invitation had all that information on
Right.
it, if you still have
Right.
that. But there are more of them out at the desk,
Right.
and there's other literature, you can get that there.
Can you accept a check with your name on it?
Project Veritas.
You have to
make
put
it out
that
to
on there,
Project
okay.
Veritas, and you'll get a tax deduction.
James Bryan has a question.
Yes,
I'd like to hear your opinion on Snowden.
Yeah, I have one made out in his name, that's why I asked.
Sure. You're such an enemy of the state that you might actually have to leave the country.
So Snowden, I think that, the question about whether Snowden is a traitor or a hero is an important discussion. It's an interesting discussion. I think it's the least important question we should be asking. The fact that the media is talking so much about this guy and who he is and whether he's a hero or not, the fact is, what did he expose?
Exactly.
And what I see, right, what I see the media doing is they deflect from important issues and they focus on these unimportant issues because if the media was focusing on the actual federal government spying and snooping and breaking laws, it would be very bad for our president. So, let me give you an example. When I did the Acorn story in California, I caught an Acorn guy telling me how to traffic in underage prostitutes across the Tijuana Mexican border. I was sued for invading his privacy, for taping this guy without his permission, which I would argue that he's a public official, he gets your taxpayer dollars, this door is open, there's no expectation of privacy, etc. And the media was like, O'Keefe's a liar because he taped this guy. This is what they do. They make the discussion about the journalist and whether he's a hero or not, and they have nothing to say about what he exposed. So, we can have that discussion, but let's talk about the whistleblower, what the whistleblower actually exposes. Do I think Snowden should come back to the United States? I kind of, I know he's in a difficult predicament, but I do kind of think he should come back to the United States. I'm never going to leave the country. It's just not how I roll. I have been incarcerated, audited, defamed, placed on probation. By the way, word on defamation, this is going to make you laugh. The New Jersey Star-Ledger, I sued them for defamation for calling me a felon. Called me a felon. I'm not a felon. I've never committed a felony. Pled guilty to a misdemeanor. And I sued the Star-Ledger for defamation, and here's what I am allowed to tell you. Lawyers give me things to say. He said, the parties have agreed to a resolution. Well, I have used the fruits of that resolution to fund more investigations. So, that may not answer your question, but I don't really want to have a conversation about whether this guy's a hero or a traitor. I want to have a conversation about why the NSA is spying on us.
Right, exactly.
James, so all of you are going to get a copy of the book. Make sure you give it to someone under the age of 30 when you're done reading it. It is absolutely critical that they start reading this book. James, 3 ways that they've treated you, the media, and I'd like to get your response to this. 1, they mocked you intellectually and said you weren't a journalist.
Yeah.
Then when that didn't work, they went on and tried to insult your integrity and said that you had integrity issues. That didn't work. Now they've started to ignore you.
Correct.
How do you, us helping fund you is key, but how do you move past that to make sure that more of these videos, because the NPR video was as brilliant as any of the other ones, how do you move past that to get
Excellent question. So you're saying, how do you make a difference when they're ignoring you?
Right.
So in the book, I talk about the Veritas rules, like the Alinsky rules, except these are sort of shortcuts for people who don't have to make the same mistakes. And one of the rules is like Gandhi says, first they ignore you, then they mock you, then they fight you, and then you win. Well, in the case of the media, what they do is first they fight you.
Yep.
So in the Acorn story, they put so much ink. And if they had known that we had multiple tapes, they would never have attacked Andrew and I the way they did. They thought, oh, we're just going to kill this story in the womb. We're going to call James a racist. The Washington Post, front page story. O'Keefe motivated by racist factors. Of course, they had to print a retraction. They went overboard. But the way that you continue to make a difference is by focusing on content. Content is king. They were already ignoring me after the NPR story. And then I broke this New Hampshire tape. And then I broke the Eric Holder tape. And then I broke the Moran tape. And when the Moran tape happened, Congressman Moran's son actually resigned. And when that happens, guess what happens? The Associated Press writes a story. They have to.
Yep.
They have to. It's news. When a congressman's director resigns, it's news. And then when the Associated Press writes a story, then the Washington Post picks it up, begrudgingly, on page B12. Guy resigns after a video release. They don't want to talk about it, but they're forced to talk about it. When, for example, when the Obama phone story happened recently, we did a story on Obama phones, where we showed the phones were sold to buy drugs and handbags. When that happens, guess what happened? They fired 6 workers. And they forced a worker retraining of all the entitlement program. And the FCC responded to our video. We got the federal government to respond to our video and force a examination of these issues. So if you look at all of our tapes, from Medicaid to teachers unions, we always get governors to respond. In fact, Governor Lynch here was asking for my incarceration. Nevertheless, I get them to respond to me. And that's journalism.
Yeah. Dickhead's boss.
Dickhead's boss. Dickhead's boss. I can't make this stuff up. I can't make it up.
I kind of feel bad for him.
Richard W. Head, he makes sure that he kind of hides it.
Richard Head.
So I think the answer to your question is you break through. That's why the book's called Breakthrough. Because even after they ignored me, I keep on producing stories that force results.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other-
Thank you for doing that.
James, I have a question. I don't know if you are aware of Sybil Edmonds. Are you?
I am not aware.
Okay. She's written a book called The Classified Woman. And she does talk about going, she was hired after 9/11 and went forward to start saying that something was amiss in her department and trying to call attention to it. And eventually becomes a classified woman because nobody can talk about her story. I urge people to read that. It's a very interesting book, but it does give some light into what's going on here as well. And I know she does have a whistleblowers group. You have a similar type organization that's starting to arise from people who are whistleblowing in essence.
The only organization we have is Project Veritas, and we do kind of have people who are starting to come to us and give us content. People who are like in the street and film the police officer violating their Fourth Amendment rights. We have that type of thing. I would like to make one statement about whistleblowers. You know, the whole Michael Hastings thing again. He gave an interview before he died. He said, I worked for Newsweek. My hands were tied. He says, I couldn't do any of the stories I wanted to do. They were bearings, they were not challenging society's assumptions. They were not doing anything to disrupt the status quo. They can't. Fox News, people love Fox News. Fox News is part of News Corporation, which is a publicly traded corporation.
Right.
Do you really think that a publicly traded corporation is going to sink its teeth into the Department of Justice?
No.
They can't do that. In fact, when I did the Eric Holder ballot story, it was a huge story, Banner and Drudge Report. It made the New York Times. It prompted an investigation by the Attorney General's office in DC, District of Columbia, and Fox News wouldn't touch it. They didn't touch it because it was false. It was obviously true. They didn't touch it because it was true. Because the truer it gets, the worse it gets for entrenched media interests. So, in other words, if you want to do this type of journalism, you have to be independent. The problem, the constitutional crisis arises, independent journalists don't have the same First Amendment protections that the establishment press has. And now Congress is talking about a shield law to protect certain reporters who are entrenched and not protect the reporters who are not. That's even worse. Because I'm telling you right now, the only people who are going to expose the truth are independent people.
Right.
They don't have the advertising interests, that they don't have the special ties. So my message is you got to support the rights of independent people who do this work. And I think there's going to be a constitutional crisis in the coming years on this issue.
Quick question for you. We at Granite Rock have certainly tried to put up every single video that you have made because I think they're uproariously funny, to be perfectly honest. But my question comes up to the other parts of the new media. Obviously, the question was, how do you get around the old media? Well, you turn to the new media.
Right.
And certainly the new left media are going to excoriate you, and they certainly have. A lot of the new media on the right has embraced you, but not all of them. Can you
Correct.
speak to that, and why wouldn't somebody who would normally be aligned with you and the purposes that you are trying to get across, open and transparent government, why are the people in the new media on the right bad-mouthing you?
Why are the people on, and there are some people on the right who are hesitant to embrace it. I was on Rush Limbaugh's show, and now he doesn't give many interviews. He interviewed me. That was a big help. Because of Rush Limbaugh, the book's a New York Times bestseller because he told everyone to go buy it. And they did. But one of the things that he brought up, the first question Rush asked me was, James, do you find that people on the conservatives are not really in your corner? And I think there's a combination of factors. I thought about this a lot. I think conservatives are so beaten down in the pop culture that they are utterly unwilling to stand up for their own beliefs. And also, conservatives don't like controversy. Conservatives, at the slightest bit of impropriety, conservatives will go running to the hills. And what I do is I cause major disruption. I rip a hole in people's narrative. I challenge laws. I without even lobbying legislators, I get laws changed. Think about that for a second. People spend tens of millions of dollars trying to change laws through advertising and lobbying. We've changed a dozen laws and forced Congress to take action just by filming things. But I think conservatives don't like blood in the water. They don't like controversy. They don't like change. Leftists, tracing back to communists, they love change. They're social conflict. That's what they do. And unfortunately, in this day and age, conservatives need to learn from them.
Right.
Conservatives need to be socially conflict-oriented if they're going to make a difference.
Absolutely.
So it's in their nature.
Yeah.
In their nature.
Yeah.
In one of the second chapter in the book, my dean leans into me now, James. A respectable conservative publication, like in the William F. Buckley would never do what you do. You know, that's what they say. So, if I could summarize it in one sentence, conservatives don't like to win. They don't want to be effective. I'm not talking about you guys.
Conservatives don't
Necessarily.
But James, do you think some of it is because they have no confidence in the arguments, they don't know what the counter discussions are, and so they don't like to lose, and so they also don't therefore make the arguments because they're afraid that they're gonna be, so what do I say now? The guy just blasted my argument away. How do I counter that? And they just don't have enough of the facts at their fingertips.
That could be true, but you know, one of the things that Andrew always says, politics is downstream from culture. And you can make all these arguments all day long, but that's not what really changes people's hearts and minds. The culture does, music does, entertainment does, video does. You can make all the arguments in the world and they can just say, why do you hate women? You hate women, you don't gonna give them birth control, and that's what won them the election. So what I do, what Project Veritas does is we take those emotional pressure points on race, sex, abortion, and all these other things, and we use it against them. So we'll go into, like we did in Texas around the election, we went into Houston, Texas, Organizing for America office, which is Barack Obama's re-election division. And we said to them, hey, and this is my female colleague, she says, you know, it's really important I get my birth control. I'm so afraid of Mitt Romney winning. That's why I need to vote multiple times in this election. And if the woman says, well, I don't know about that, say, why do you hate women? Don't you want us to have our birth control? See, we're using their own rules against them. And then, of course, they help us. The woman helped us vote multiple times. She gave us an absentee to vote in Florida because we said to her, I need that birth control. Hell or high water, I'm going to get that free birth control. Help me vote twice for Obama. So that's what we do at Project Veritas, is we make them live up to their own principles.
Isn't a big part of the conservative that she's talking about? The national, certainly, and many statewide conservatives, quote unquote, they're statists. They are vested in the status quo. They only want to change things on the margins, and they will not stand up on principle because they are part of the problem.
I think that's probably part of it. There's a chapter in this book, Breakthrough, where, I don't know how many of you know this story, but remember those Acorn Pimp and Hooker videos with the prostitute? Well, the prostitute was Hannah Giles, my colleague, and I was the pimp. And we went to Washington. I hadn't even met Andrew Breitbart yet. I went to Washington to meet with the Republican Oversight Committee people. I thought, man, why not show the videos to the Congress people? And they said, James, this is great stuff, fascinating, wonderful. You got to release it to the Republican Party. And I said, I'd rather go independent with it to retain its credibility. They said, well, if that's what you're going to do, then we're going to arrest you for not cooperating with the authorities. So, like, just take a step back and think about this for a second. Not only did the Inspector General not do their job, not only did the Republican Party spend hundreds of millions, they got nothing to show for it. Two young people, myself included, we had to basically spend our own money to investigate Acorn. I hand the footage on a silver platter to the established interests, and they threatened to arrest me.
Well, that's my point.
Killing the messenger brings the bad news.
Indirectly.
That is your point, and I'm illustrating it.
Yeah.
And it's Shakespearean.
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But that's why people need to read this. They need to understand just how bad it is.
Especially the kids, I have to say.
They have to understand what they're up
And
against.
this could be 1968 in reverse.
Precisely.
Upside down. I mean, it really could.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going
If
to
we
happen.
could get them to read the
James,
book. Think like that.
I happen to be a conservative who's really not afraid to speak out and say anything. I can't see him. And
I'm not in your Donna.
the problem that I have is, as a conservative, and I understand you don't want to be political, but the problem that I have is, where do you go to express yourself? I mean, we had a wonderful group that got together, the Tea Party, and they were expressing themselves, and what happened? The press vilified them.
Right.
I mean, people make fun of them, people call them teabaggers, people do everything. Where do you go to be able to express yourself, to continue to do, and to fight these people? I'm not happy.
Right.
I'm not happy with, the Republicans that are in control of the
Right.
Congress. I'm not happy with what they're doing. But I guess the frustration is where do you go? How can you be heard? You can be heard with what you do, but there's, I hate to mention this name because sometimes I don't like mention, but Nixon used to talk about the silent majority. I believe there is a silent majority out here that wants to be heard, that's tired of all this, that's tired of the politics, tired of the way things are going, and afraid for our country. But I have no idea where to go to be able to express that, to make these changes that we need to make.
So I think if I can understand your question, is basically how do we get around, number one, the media incessant attacks and
Yes.
vilification and ridicule. How do you get around the ridicule?
And to have people listen to you.
Right, I would say that probably you're gonna have to ridicule them.
Well, that's pretty easy.
Well, then do it.
But where? You can do it on your video.
I've done it on YouTube. Think about this for a second. YouTube videos prompted all these things to happen. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any power. Now I have an organization with many small donors, but at the time I had nothing, and I put it on YouTube. And content is king. I can only speak for what I do. I don't claim to be an expert at Tea Party organizing. I certainly don't claim to be an expert at some of the things people here do, which is electoral politics. That's not what I do.
Right.
I am a journalist. And what I do is, the only thing I organized are other journalists. I genuinely believe, I do believe this with all my heart, that if there were to be 1,000 of me, everything would change. If I filmed all the fraud and all the entitlement programs, you think they're going to fire everyone? They can't do that. All they do is fire people when I film them these days. Well, if I filmed 1,000 people, would they fire 1,000? No, they wouldn't. They'd fire the person on top.
But they just brought it out in front of Congress, the IRS, and what they've done and brought it up,
And if I
nobody got
had
fired
one
there.
IRS person on tape, one on tape, doing the things people are talking about what they do, everything would change. If I had 15 on tape, the entire IRS would be disbanded. I guarantee you that would happen. Don't take my word for it. Happened with Acorn. Happened
Oh,
with NPR.
I believe you can do it.
Happened with voter fraud.
Yeah.
And I've done this like a couple times. I've done 0.0000001% of the fraud. Imagine if I captured 5% of the fraud. Imagine if I captured 50% of the fraud. So my vision is just just a mathematical certainty. If you film more of the fraud, then you're going to change people's hearts and minds. I can only speak, on behalf of what I do as a journalist. As in terms of how we're going to get good people in office and the Tea Party movement, I can't speak to that.
This will be the last question.
Last question.
Have you had any contact with any of the Benghazi survivors? Just out of curiosity, I mean, maybe you can't say, but is that a possibility to look into that at some point?
I have not. That's not something.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was,
Contact with Benghazi.
have I had any contact with Benghazi
Survivors.
and that's actually not something I have explored. And part of the reason I haven't explored it is because there's just so many journalists who are looking into that issue. So it's hard for me to get the type of access.
They
I mean,
are?
on the right.
Oh.
So it's hard for me to get the type of access that some of these other people have. I do more undercover work and.
But don't they have them in the witness protection program or something anywhere? I mean, they're kind of.
Yeah, they do.
But if
And,
one of them came to you, would you pursue it?
yes, if they sought me out on my website or found a way to get in touch with me, I have had people do that on other issues. Mostly entitlement programs, people come to me. A lot of court-related issues and local issues. But if they sought me out, I would certainly give them. So are we going to have a book signing? Or?
We are going to do a book signing, and hang on a second, Jack. I just want to tell everybody, and James, thank you so much for being here tonight, for answering all our questions. I know we all have tons more questions, but you're going to hang around for a little while.
Yeah.
I know some people have to leave. We want to get into the book signing. We're going to bring the book, Dan, if you could bring some books in, and let's give James a couple of minutes to get something to drink and to freshen up a little bit. And he's going to be sitting in here where Tom is right now. Keeping the seat warm. And he's going to be signing your books, personalizing your books. Now, if you want to see more of James, because he's here for the next few days, he's got 2 more events this week in New Hampshire. Thank you very much. Tuesday night, it's at 7 o'clock, is that right? 7 o'clock at Sky Meadow in Nashua at the Sky Meadow Country Club. And on Thursday night in Manchester, and where's Pam? Is Pam still here? At any rate, people, there are notices about both of these events on the table out here in the hall. If you think of someone who you want to share this information with, take one of the flyers. It's not too late to make a reservation and come to see James on Tuesday or Thursday night. So we're going to take a little break now, and then we'll do the book signing.
I have 60 seconds to 60 seconds, not a
Jack?
question.
Oh, Jack's gonna make a
James, I just
speech.
wanted to say, yeah, 60, I've been an admirer of yours ever since Acorn started, but I want all of you in this room to understand how courageous this young man is and what he has accomplished, really, through sheer courage and tenacity. And he makes a great point. Everyone in this room knows how to use an iPhone, some more than others, but it has the ability to speak if you have the courage of your convictions. He makes a great point. You know, we got to start a lot of little brush fires around this country. He started a major conflagration, and he's just one guy, one brave young man. And I think the world of you, James. Just keep it up and take care of yourself. Thanks.
I'd like to say something. I want to shift the glory a little bit from James back to Diane, who has no. You've organized this whole thing, and it's all for Project Veritas, and I appreciate it. I've had the pleasure of knowing James for several years and maybe working on certain projects. I've got deniability now, Skip. Perhaps. So what you do and all of your donations to Project Veritas really makes a huge difference. So
Yes,
special thanks to Diane.
Thank you for bringing that up, Joe. I really appreciate that because I would be very, very happy if all of you opened up your wallets and.
That guy right there, Daniel Francisco,
Dan, over here.
he is my executive director for Project Veritas.
Thank you. Unashamedly, we ask you to contribute so that James and his team can continue their hard work.
Do I have to use this table?
JOK TV.